All right, excellent. So we'll get started. Thanks everybody. Thank you all for joining today. Good afternoon or potentially good morning, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining. Today's discussion, today's webinar is about PAW chart creation. And we're going to talk about creating charts using the new PAW experience. Okay. So before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. Today's event is being recorded, and this way you'll be able to have it for future viewing. We can send out a copy of these slides to anybody who's interested, and we will also be posting a copy of the video on our Revelwood YouTube channel. During the presentation, all attendees will be muted. So if you do have any questions, please type them into the Q&A section. We will definitely try to answer them as we go along, but in the event that we're not able to, then we will certainly be able to answer them afterwards. Today's presenters, my name is Lee Lazaro, and I'm the Planning Analytics Leader at Revelwood. I've been doing this for a while, and I have more than 2 decades of OLAP experience, most of which is associated with TM1 and Planning Analytics. I'm joined today by my colleague, Dylan Rossman. Dylan has almost a decade of financial experience and has been involved with many of our recent PAW implementations. Both of us are fully certified in various aspects of model development, administration, and training. And Dylan's going to show you some of the aspects specifically about PAW charting today. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to start a little bit, we're going to start by talking a little bit about who we are. We'll tell you about Revelwood, about why you're here and why you want to listen and learn some of the pieces from here. But then we're going to jump right into the meat and potatoes of the presentation and talk a little bit about charts and the new experience. We're going to talk a little bit about charting, of why we want to think about charts, and talk about what makes charts in the new experience a little bit different than previous iterations of creating graphs and charts. And after we're done talking about it, I'm going to turn it over to Dylan. Dylan's going to actually show us some aspects of it. He's going to show us different ways to create charts. He's going to do some live demonstrations, and we're actually going to create a few charts that you'll be able to mimic. Once he's finished completing it, we're going to take it away from the technical aspect and talk about other things to consider, things that you want to think about when you're creating charts and when you're rolling some of the graphs out to the users. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. Okay. So to start things off, let me tell you a little bit about Revelwood. We have been doing this for over 25 years, and this meaning focusing on IBM Analytics, what used to be known as TM1, now known as Planning Analytics. We are a gold business partner with IBM, and we're actually the first gold business partner in the world to associate with IBM. Reason being is we have hundreds of successful implementations, both domestic and international, and we do that with our team. Our team is certified and experienced. Like we said before, I've been doing this for a couple of decades. Dylan has been doing this kind of work for a decade. The word decade is used regularly with our team. Okay. We are able, most of our background, as we talked about with Dylan and myself, most of our background is from the business side. And the biggest strength that Revelwood brings to the table is we have the ability to bring business and technology together. We don't just talk bits and bytes. We don't just talk debits and credits. We actually talk both of them. And because of that, we are a member of various councils associated with business planning. North American Business Partner Council. We're also part of the Global IBM Planning Analytics Advisory Board. And the main reason is our tagline. We speak business first. We are not here just to implement a computer program. We're here to help solve your business challenges and business problems. And how do we do that? We do that with the tool Planning Analytics. And I want to, for those who are still a little bit new with the tool, I want to come back to a little bit of a basic history. Okay, what is PAW? Really what PAW is it's the web-based interface. So PA stands for Planning Analytics, and there's a lot of iterations of what I've heard W stand for. I've heard people who reference it as Planning Analytics Web. I've heard some people reference it as Planning Analytics Watson. PAW stands for Planning Analytics Workspace. But no matter what you reference the W for, the concept of PAW is really the web-based interface. Right? Now, when we talk about PAW, there's 2 different iterations, 2 different versions that you're going to hear. You're going to hear both in today's presentation and you're going to hear throughout the community. You're going to hear something called PAW Classic, and you're going to hear about something called PAW New Experience. Really what that is versioning. So prior to version 57, PAW had a certain look and feel, and that's what we call PAW Classic. As of version 57 or 58, depending on whether you were local or on the cloud, Planning Analytics created a series of changes, most of which were interface and functionality. Okay? From an interface perspective, they changed the look and feel. From a functionality standpoint, they added something called applications and plans. They added some Watson related components called forecasting. They made some changes to the administration. Okay? As part of that look and feel, they also made changes to the way we do charting, and that's today's focus. This aspect of the new experience was a different look and feel to the way that we were doing various things. So we're going to talk specifically today about books and visualizations. Okay? For those of you interested in learning a little bit more about some of the other functionality, applications, plan, administration, forecasting, Revelwood has some other webinars that we've done over the past year or so. They are all located on our Revelwood YouTube channel, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But for purposes of today, the main goal is to talk about the visualizations, which is what IBM references as the charts. Okay. So before we do that, let's take a step back and think about, why do we want charts? The greatest thing about this tool, the greatest thing about Planning Analytics, is it gives you the ability to set up views, or what we often call explorations, to look at your numbers. This is where I could create pivots. This is where I can slice and dice. This is where I can use all those fancy words. But the reality of it is, the great thing about these explorations is it's a lot of numbers. A lot of the people on this call are finance people. You love numbers. You live for numbers. I know I do. Everything is about numbers. But the challenge with an exploration is it's just a bunch of numbers. The great thing about explorations is I can look at intricate details and I could see what's going on. The challenge is I don't put them together, and that's where charts come into play. Charts give us the ability to take that. If you saw me on video, you'd see me use air quotes right now with my finger quotes. Take that bunch of numbers and make them into some kind of a picture. By putting them into a visualization gives you the ability to see things, easier understanding. When I'm looking at a lot of numbers, large data sets, I want to be able to see some kind of a picture. When I'm looking at charts and graphs, I'm able to see relationships. I'm able to see patterns. Relationships, I want to be able to see company one versus company two. I want to see a chart where maybe I'm looking at actual versus budget. Maybe I want to see some kind of a trend or seasonality. All the different things, kind of like when you're watching cartoons and you look at somebody, they have a line chart. They always have a line chart pointing up when things are going great. They always have a line chart pointing down when things aren't going so great. Something that simple, something that quick to look at and understand gives us the ability to quickly see what's going on. That's where charts come into play. Now, what kinds of charts can we create in the PAW world? PAW has a series of different charts that can be created. And again, I'm going to use the IBM term visualizations. This screen right here shows all the different visualizations that are in the new experience. So those of you who are new to the tool, you could see right there that there's a lot of different visualizations. Those of you who've been using it as part of the classic view, you could see that some of these are PAW visualizations that were there in the past, but they've added a few more. Okay? But the thing to think about is, with all of these different visualizations, which ones do I want to use? And the way that I like to think about it is I like to think about, what commonly used type am I looking at? If you look back at these visualizations, most of them fall into one of three categories. Comparison. These are where your bar charts and your column charts come into play. I want to be able to look at X versus Y. I want to look at company versus company versus company, department versus department versus department, actual versus budget, something versus another. And that's what we call comparisons. Okay. Maybe I want to see something where I want to see the pieces of it. And that's composition. That's where you're going to find your pie charts. That's where I'm going to be able to say 50% of my sales came from one bucket, 30% from another, 20% from a third. Okay. Add those all together, it shows me the parts of a whole. Third commonly used type, trend. This is where I'm able to look at my lines. This is where I'm able to look at seasonality, growth, various other aspects, which not only shows me historical, but starts to give me the pattern where I can look into the future. Okay. And the question you ask yourself when I'm figuring out what visualization or visualizations do I use is what am I trying to show? Okay. Based on this, thinking about all the different ways to look at the same exact set of data, the question I like to ask myself is, what's my end result? What specific question am I trying to answer? Which evolves back into what are you trying to show? Okay. So from there, we've got all these different types of charts, and we start to segue into creating them. And in the PAW environment, there are three different ways that we can use to create charts. Approach number one, convert an existing exploration. So creating a chart is as simple as saying, I'm going to create an exploration. Back in the legacy tool, we used to call that a view. Use your drag and drop functionality, use your subset editor. All I want to do is create some kind of a grid, and then I can click on a button that simply says change the visualization. I can make my exploration into a chart. The second approach that I could take is I could take one of those visualizations that I just created and then just tweak it. Think of it like a copy paste or a file save as, or depending on the tool that you're looking at, what you may often do if you were in an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe I have a version and I want to create another version of the same spreadsheet. I might do file save as, and then take that first one and make some tweaks. Maybe if I had two sets of grids, I want to just do a copy, I want to paste and make a tweak. That exact same approach can be used in PAW using what we call a duplicate. We can take an existing chart, click on a single button to say replicate it entirely. Replicate the look, the feel, the parameters, the specifications, and then I can tweak it. And the third approach is a little less wizard based. It's much more built from scratch. And I could create a visualization directly in a book. This gives me the ability to manually define, what do I want on my various axes? What do I want to filter? What do I want to format? So those three approaches are the ways that I can navigate some data, click on a button and say, make it a chart. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn it over to Dylan, and Dylan's actually going to show us examples of each of these three, and he's going to give us a demonstration of building them.
All right, so as Lee mentioned, there are three really different ways that you can go about creating a visualization. We're going to walk through each one of them. So for this first one here, you see we have a very simple exploration setup. You'll see we have total company with various companies underneath that on the rows, net income on the columns, and then up top we have a month, actuals, and then a few other top level elements selected. So converting this to a visualization as simple as clicking this, going up here to the toolbar, it says exploration, and you'll see it says change visualization right underneath that. Click on that, and then I can go ahead and choose from the various types that Lee pointed out earlier. For this example, we're just going to choose a column. So if I choose column, you'll see just like that, it switches over to a visualization. Now, this isn't perfect. There's a lot more that we can do with it, and we're going to get into that later on. But this just shows, how easy it is to go from exploration to visualization. Now, if we want to get a little more complicated with this and we'll dive into some more details, I have a similar view set up where you'll see same row set with the company, but in addition to that, we also have scenarios, actuals, and budget. Everything else is the same. So in this situation, we're looking at a company, we're saying, okay, what are the actuals? What's the budget for net income? Now, if I do the same thing for this, and I say, all right, let's turn this into a column chart, you're going to notice right away that what it did is on the bottom, on the x-axis, it went ahead and it basically created a column combining each intersection of company and scenario. So you'll see total company actuals, total company final budget, etc. Now, this is okay, but there's a lot that we can do to improve this and make it look a lot nicer and easier to get information out of at a glance. Now, if I click on this, you'll see there's an option up here called fields. Now, when I click on fields, you're going to notice a whole bunch of different options in here. Right away, you're going to see underneath bars, we have company and scenario. So what's making up this x-axis here? And you'll see length, net income, what's making up the y-axis. And then everything else kind of just gets thrown into this filters bucket. Now, what would be nice is if I could set this up so instead of just showing a column that doesn't really look any different from each other, maybe we can add some color to this, and that's where this color field comes into play, right? So if I were to take this scenario dimension with my actuals and final budget selected and just drag this over to color, what you're going to notice what happens is we no longer have scenario on the bottom here. It's just company. You're going to notice that we now have two different colors, making it a lot easier to see which is which. And we have a little legend up top here that shows actuals is purple, final budget's blue. I can click on one of these and it'll highlight those, or I can click on the other one, or I can click out of that. So right away, that's an improvement for what we had, right? Now, looking at this, I can see that we have total company here. And maybe I don't want to see total company. Maybe I don't want to see this total consolidated element, right? So what I can do is if I go into my fields over here where I had the company dimension underneath bars, you'll see these three dots, and each one of these dimensions has these three dots. And if I click on it, you'll see I have a little menu here where I can edit set, I can hide the dimension from the view, I can hide totals, I can remove it, I can remove this hierarchy, I can do some sorting. Now I could go and edit the set and just remove total company, or I can click this button right here called hide totals. And just like that, it's gone. Now, looking at this, I can see that this corporate element really doesn't provide much value. Looks like there's a tiny number in there for actuals. There's nothing in there budgeted. So, maybe I don't want to see this on here. So what I can do, if I hover over the element, you'll see it highlights the bar and also gives you some information on it. If I right click on it, I have more options. I can keep just this one. I can hide this one, unhide all. I can do some drilling, formatting, etc. But for my purposes, I'm just going to hide it. So just like that, now we have a better view of more important information, I'd say. Now, working off of that, we also have some other options in here that I haven't touched yet, right? So just walking through each one. Bars, I think it's pretty clear what that is. It's really just what the bars are in the column chart, right? So in this case, it's each company. Length would be whatever is driving the size of the bar, right? So the more net income or less net income, the larger the bar. In this case, if it goes into the negatives or positives. Why start? That is defining where the length must start. So if you have some kind of metric in there that you want to use, the bar will actually start at the value of that metric. So like, let's say if the metric started at 50,000, this bar wouldn't start till 50,000. Target is exactly what it sounds like. If I want to include some kind of target in here, like we're looking to hit this number, if I were to drag an element in there that contains the information, that would then become the target. Color we reviewed, that just kind of drives what you're seeing here, where I have different scenarios or different whatever, and based off of that, it's differentiating the bars with different colors, right? Then we have repeat. Repeat is basically just iterating through a chart, whether it's by column or by row. And I'll just show that very quickly what happens here. If I were to drag, let's say, department in here onto repeat, you're going to say right away, it's going to create a whole lot of them because there's a lot of departments. So you see there's a ton here, but if I were to narrow this down a little bit, and let's say I only want to see sales and marketing, manufacturing, distribution, and general administrative, and I go ahead and I keep those and I apply, you're going to see it iterates through 3 different charts. Now, maybe for purposes of this view, not necessary, but it's something that is possible. And it's also very easy to undo anything you do in this by just hitting the undo button. So if I make a mistake and say, hey, you know what, I actually don't want to do this, it's very easy to go back and forth, whether you're undoing or redoing the steps that you take. And then the last piece of this is the filters, right? And this is basically where everything else ends up. If it's not in the bars, the length, or any of these fields, it's a filter. And that's where you'll see the selections that we have driving the intersection for the data we're seeing. So a whole lot of options in here. But beyond that, right now we have a chart, right? But there are a few things that I think we can improve upon. So first thing, I can see if I hover over any one of these bars, it'll tell me what the value is. And I can also kind of figure it out just by looking at where it is on the chart, but maybe I want to display exactly what the number is right on the chart. So what I can do is if I click on the chart, go to properties, you'll see we have a whole slew of options for visualization. Now, maybe I want to turn those labels on. If I go to chart and show value labels, what you're going to see is now we have numbers on here, exact number for that data point. So that's one thing that I like. I think it looks nice and I think it's helpful. But like I was saying, there's a whole slew of things that we can do. Maybe I want to change the color palette of this. Maybe I want to use a custom color palette. I can create one. Maybe I just want to use a default one set by IBM. So maybe I want to make this all purple. Sure, looks good enough. Maybe not the first choice I would use, but good enough. All right, so I can change color just like that. Now, the next thing I'm noticing is if I look at the axes here, as well as the legend, you'll see the title that it gives is company, colon, and then either some kind of subset or a specific element. And I can actually change these. So if I go to axis, and you'll see that, again, there's a whole slew of options here. But if I go to axis, item axis title, in this case, company is the item axis. I go to and I type in company, maybe I just want to call it company, hit enter. And there we go. We have a new axis title. I can do the same thing for the y-axis, which is considered the value axis. So I'll just call it net income, hit enter. And then I'm also going to rename the legend. I don't want it to be called scenario selection. So I'll go into the legend option here. You'll see there's a color legend title, and I'll just call it scenario. And again, whole slew of options here. We're not going to go through every single one, but there are a ton of customization options. So I'll hit scenario, hit enter, and there we go. Now, maybe I also want to add a title, right? To do that, I can click on this, and instead of under visualization, I'll go to general, and I go to appearance. I have some more options. I can, add a fill color to this chart. I can add border colors, a whole bunch of different stuff. You'll see right here, I have show title. Let me click on that. And just like that, I have a title. I'll call it, I don't know, net income budget versus actuals by company. And just like that, I now have a title. So you'll see very easily, I went from a pretty basic looking chart to something that looks more refined, some more detail in here. And I can actually go a little further even. You're also going to notice that the value labels over here are a little different than the ones over here. So what I can do is if I click on the chart, up here there's a format values button, click on that. And let's just choose rounded. So now we also have this all synchronized up in terms of formatting. So that's nice as well. So again, we went from something pretty basic to a bit more refined pretty quickly, pretty easily. And again, there are a ton of other options. What I showed is by no means all the options, and with each update, there are more and more customization options, which is wonderful. Now, the next way that we can go about creating a chart is duplicate, which Lee also mentioned. So if I go to duplicate, you'll see I have a chart set up. It's just a simple pie chart. Travel expense by company in dollars, right? Where I have 3 companies, I'm looking at the travel expense, and you'll see the breakdown in terms of which is the biggest versus smallest based on the pie chart. Now I can very easily click on this and say, okay, let's duplicate it, because maybe I want to create a chart that's pretty much the same, but maybe instead of numbers, we show percentages. So if I click on duplicate, you'll see just like that, I have a new chart. And I can move it over here. And let me just change the title right away because I know exactly what it's going to be. So let's just go ahead and change it to percentages. And let me click on this. I can go to properties. And then if I scroll down the chart, you'll see I have some different options based on the chart types. I now have this display percentage chart option. Turn that on. And now we have percentages here. And just to note, from chart to chart, some of these options may differ, but overall, they're pretty similar. Same thing with the fields. If I click into field, you'll see instead of bars in length, we have segments in size, but really it's the same concept, right? Segments, what are making up segments, size, what is determining how big they are. But with that, I now have two charts, one showing travel expense by company in dollars, one showing percentages. And you also see I have a little selection here. So this chart over here was already synchronized up. When I duplicate it, the synchronization carries over. So if I were to change this to, let's say, March, you'll see automatically these are going to update, just like that. Now, the third and final way we can go about creating a chart is from scratch, right? To do that, what I can do is on the toolbar over here, you'll see a visualizations button. If I click on that, we'll see all the different options that Lee mentioned earlier. I'm just going to go with a stacked bar, just arbitrarily. Now, once I have this, you'll see I have a bunch of options to either drag things onto here or here. So if I go into my databases, I go into my finance cube, and let's see what I want to do here. So I'm going to go ahead and put company on the bars. Now I can either drag it on here or I can drag it here. I'm just going to drag it here just out of preference. So I'll put company on the bars. And you'll see automatically once I bring that cube in, everything else ends up in filters. So now I'm just going to go ahead and move these things to where I want them. So for length, I'm going to go ahead and put a count there. And then for color, maybe we'll do departments. And then from there, let's go ahead and select some elements. So let me go ahead and edit the set. And let me grab total company. And let me just expand it, apply and close. And then let me grab an account for here. Let's see what we want. I'm just going to grab operating expenses. Grab that, pull that over, apply and close. And then maybe for department, I don't want to see everything here. Maybe I want to see a select set. So I'll just go ahead and I'll choose sales and marketing and manufacturing and distribution. Keep those, apply. All right. And then we'll go ahead and we'll just choose actuals, just arbitrarily. Let's choose actuals. So we'll grab actuals, apply. And just like that, we have a chart. Now, I can do any of the stuff that I did before. Maybe again, maybe I want to remove totals, so I can do that. And just like that, we have a full chart from scratch. Now, obviously, this is nothing crazy, but just shows you how easy it is to do it, whether you're converting, duplicating, or creating from scratch. It all can be done within a few minutes. Now, personally, I will say that I do prefer to start off with an exploration, a view, and convert it, mainly because I like to see the data that I want to incorporate to the visualization rather than build the visualization and then figure out the data. So that's my personal preference, but there is no wrong way. These all work great. They're all easy and they all give you tons of customization options. Now, with that said, that's everything that I had to demo. So if I can hand it back to you, Lee.
All right, excellent. So now that Dylan has shown us how to create the presentations, what I want to do is I want to focus on some of the aspects in regards to when and why to create the, I said presentations, I mean charts, okay? Things to consider. So the ultimate goal of what you want to do, the ultimate goal is that you want to give your users a good end user experience. Okay, you want to give them easy navigation. Okay, you don't want to bring them into a system where they don't know what to do, they don't know what they're looking at. So you want to give some kind of an easy way to move around. Some of the examples of these are separating your inputs from your outputs, where you want to get summary data, where you want to go for details, the way that you can navigate from one spot to another, in essence, to tell the story. Like we said before, the ultimate goal of these charts are to be able to answer a question or a set of questions. The navigation is going to help you answer that while also telling a story. And you also want to think about what kinds of things do you want people to see? If the ultimate question is, I want to see X. The ultimate answer is here is X. But most organizations that I work with have certain criteria that they want to do. Logos, fonts, color schemes. And logos are great. They customize your experience. Fonts, color schemes are great. Sometimes I've seen this because people are very serious about here's my organization. Sometimes they're a little bit more in good humor of, I want a certain color because it's my favorite sports team or it's the local color or something like that. The thing that you want to think about is you want to figure out what makes sense and what is taking up space. I talk about this a lot when we're implementing reports for organizations that say, I need a big logo at the top of every one of my pages. Absolutely makes sense. But one of the things you want to think about is how much real estate are you taking up? Your screen is only a certain size. Whether you've got a 19-inch monitor, whether you've got a 60-inch monitor, you still only have a certain size. And one of the things to think about is how do you utilize your real estate? How do you want to set that up? When you're setting that up, one of the things you want to think about is where do I set up my dimensions? So Dylan just showed us a series of ways that we can create dimensions. And if you think about it, depending on the chart you're looking at, there's a lot of different words. There's a lot of fancy words that are used based on the type of chart. But based on one of the questions that just came through, really all of us still think about it as an x-axis and a y-axis. My sixth grader is in the process of learning math, and he's already being taught, this is the x-axis, this is the y-axis. One of the things you want to think about is you want to think about where does time fit into that equation. And I like to always put time on the x-axis. I always like to see time going across. And the reason being, people inherently think taller is better on a column chart. So if you were to put time going up and down on some kind of a column chart, people may disassociate time versus time as opposed to good versus bad. So because they inherently think taller is better, most people also inherently think start to finish when I'm looking left to right. People read left to right, they think left to right, they analyze left to right. So by putting time on the x-axis, not only gives us the ability to start thinking about time, where you could see those patterns, this happened before that, here's where we're heading in the future. It also gives us the ability to not have to retrain ourselves on what's on the report. Okay? And another thing to think about on time is do everything you can to keep your data points consistent. When you're looking at a line chart, when you're looking at a bar chart, anything like that where you're looking at, maybe bar chart's a bad example, but anything where you're trending time left to right, keep your data points consistent. Definitely on a chart, more probably on a dashboard. If I have two line charts right next to each other, one of them is by week, another one is by year, it's hard to stop and think about what's going on. Yeah, you could say to yourself, so what? You stop and think for a moment. But the ability, the requirement of stopping and thinking when you're looking at a dashboard takes away that whole concept of a quick visualization. Okay? And with that quick visualization, thinking about the visualizations that you put on a dashboard. What Dylan showed is Dylan showed how to create a chart, and he showed you different methods to create a chart. But one of the examples started to show charts, plural. And by putting a series of charts on the same screen is what many people refer to as their dashboard. Everybody's got a different definition of dashboard. Everybody's got different meanings. And depending on how you reference it, you may or may not agree with my next sentence. But I truly believe that a dashboard is simply a bunch of charts on a page that are giving you a story. Okay. Which visualizations do I put on that dashboard? Remember that when we had the list of all the visualizations, there were 3 different types. Each style has its own purpose. So when you think about that concept of the purpose, think about what is going to answer the question or questions that I'm trying to have on this page. Right? And the second part of that is on this page. Think about how do you want to create your various dashboards? Do you want to have a single page? Do you want to have multiple tabs? Do you want to have multiple books? Okay. Really, the way I like to think about it is I like one page to have one meaning. So if there's different sets of data, maybe different levels of security, something completely unrelated to each other, I like to think of those as different books. Why? It might be different people. It might be different trains of thoughts. Okay. But if it's the same set of data, maybe with something where you want quick navigation, that's an opportunity for you to create different tabs. That might be something where we talked about time. Maybe I want one view that's going to show me this year where I look at it by week. Maybe I'm going to want another view where I look at the last 3 years by month. Maybe I want another view where I'm looking at the last 10 years by year. That's the kind of thing that, knowing that we want to keep our data points consistent, but knowing that we're answering the same question, that could be an opportunity where we create multiple tabs where people can quickly navigate left and right. Okay. And once I'm looking at each one of those sheets, you want to think a little bit about the layout itself. Okay. And this comes back to where I was saying before. Most people read left to right when they're looking at time, but most people look at a screen in a Z pattern. So if you came in and looked at this screen when you first started, if I didn't go through the animation and I didn't have each of these 4 pieces at a time, most people would read this screen where they would look at the bullet at the top left, they would go all the way to the right because they want to stay on the same line, then they work their way down to the next line, which is time, and work their way to the right on a dashboard layout. That same concept comes into play when people are looking at charts. So because of the fact that most people read in that Z pattern, your very first image at the top left corner, your very last image at the bottom right corner, those are probably your 2 most powerful pieces that are going to answer the question that's being asked. And the other aspects of the Z, if I had 4 parts, it would be the top right corner, the bottom left corner. That would be your supporting data. Thinking about these 4 things together gives us the ability to create a nice looking dashboard with a set of charts that will answer some kind of a question, but make it easy for our users to go in, see what they need to see, and then move out. Because the overall goal of what we want to do, we want to make it fast and easy for users to understand the data. Creating a giant set of numbers is great, but it's not fast. Creating a page with a bunch of buttons and a bunch of pieces all over the place is not easy. Our overall goal, come in, figure out what you need, move on. And as I want to dig more, as I want more analytics, that's where we can do the slicing and dicing and the pieces of that. So with that being said, a couple of other things I wanted to also remind everybody of is a reminder. The whole purpose of this is to talk about the PAW New Experience, but many of you may still be on PAW Classic. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that everybody knew, and as a reminder, that very soon IBM is deprecating the concept of PAW Classic. So those of you who are on the cloud, it will be deprecated automatically. For those of you who are local, it'll be deprecated with your next upgrade. Okay. This link has some information about it. Revelwood has created a couple of white papers on it. We've sent out some information on blogs. If you have any questions or if you have any concerns about the concept of migrating from Classic to the new experience, please absolutely contact us. But I wanted to make sure that everybody knew this is very important, because for those of you on the cloud, it's not an issue of I'll get around to PAW New Experience when I want to. It's an issue of it's going to happen relatively soon. Now, I had also mentioned earlier that Revelwood does regular webinars, and we have created webinars through many of the aspects of the new experience. All of our webinars are recorded. All of our webinars get uploaded to our YouTube site. Okay. Here are a couple of the more popular ones that we've had. How do we do system admin? How do we do model development? And one that's very related to this. We had recently, a few months back, done a full webinar which digs into the intricate details of charts. We just looked at a slide in regards to 3 bullets of using charts and a couple of things to consider, but the webinar about chart actually walks through every one of those styles of charts, gives you some examples of what they look like, shows you some concepts on how to create them, but more importantly, focuses on the aspects of why would you use each one of those. So I definitely encourage you to go back and look at and watch any of our webinars. Okay. And then we have an upcoming webinar in a couple of weeks. For those of you who ever run into a situation where you're trying to move some data, maybe I want to create a snapshot. Maybe I'm looking at my forecast and I want to save it off. Maybe I want to pre-populate my budget. Revelwood is introducing a brand new tool called Data Maestro. And Data Maestro gives us the ability, using a wizard-based approach, to click on a couple of buttons and have data manipulation done inside your planning analytics environment. Okay. The webinar is in approximately 2 weeks, and I definitely encourage everybody to join that. You can register for the webinar by going to revelwood.com and going into our events, or if you'd like, please contact us and we can send you a personal link to join. So I want to thank everybody for attending today's call. I hope the presentation gave you some new ideas for your PA modeling, and we would appreciate you taking just 15 minutes or so with us over the next week for a chat. In the next day or so, myself or one of my colleagues will be reaching out to you to get some feedback and just have a brief conversation. But in the meantime, please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions about today's topic or anything else related to your planning analytics environment. Thank you again, and that concludes today's webinar.